and she cries out caught, with one bare foot in a village in the Abruzzi, the other busy with cramped English-speaking toes in Toronto. She strides the Atlantic, stretched like a colossus.
What happens is that when you emigrate, you come to a new place and you feel totally strange to this place. And immediately you want to belong. I still cannot cut my ties to Italy. I'm still Italian to a certain extent. I like to eat Italian, I listen to Italian music. I'm Italian, but I'm also Canadian. So this creates a feeling of total unsettlement, where you cannot, you have one foot on one place, one foot on the other. You're sitting on two chairs all the time, and you don't have a place.
My first trip to Italy as an adult, I took the train to Pescara, and the moment of change, the moment of revelation came as the train entered the mountains, moving through the mountains.
Come together. And as soon as you enter this kind of doorway, the valley opens up beautifully.
I realized that the minute I stepped off the airplane, I remembered there was a subconscious, a subliminal memory of the way the sunlight felt on my body.
And for the first time I saw sort of what it meant to be Italian in a much fuller sense than I'd understood in Canada.
There were all parts of me, layers of me that I had denied, hadn't been able to make sense of in an English-speaking country.
Quanto l'amore di la monsignara, l'amore che durò meno d'un'ora, vampa la capricciosa di Malara.
Well, this house was built by my grandparents, My mother was born here. My mother also got married here. And finally, my grandmother died here. 3 generations of my family have existed in this particular place.
The house meant absolutely everything. It was the focal point where everything happened. It was the place that you could always go back to. And nobody would dispute the fact that that was your house. I mean, it was my father's house, it was my grandfather's house, my great-grandfather's house. It was always our house.
Quando cominciarono a lasciare la gente, quando cominciarono a partire la gente di qua allo Canada?
Quando cominciarono?
Che era? Lo 54, lo 53?
Non mi ricordi, ti ricordi tu? Ma com'è? Prima c'era un cordaro di Casagerone.
Sì?
E faceva parte per l'America con 250 lire. Tanto.
Sì.
250 lire, ma tanto 250 lire
Era una
c'era
sala.
qua al mare, c'era al mare. Un anno fa c'era viaggiare. C'era un compagno suo che aveva figli di mio padre, come vedo. Vota della Madonna della Chiesa da... Io sono Indio, non c'è l'America.
No!
Non c'è.
No! Perché?
Aveva mia che aveva un mese, 2 mesi, e io lui mi vede manco che io.
Tu mai hai avuto il desiderio di emigrare?
Abbiamo che mangiare qua, che viene albergare.
Sì?
Lavoravamo e mangiavo.
So mai c'era tensione della
Abbiamo un
sala?
lavoro, abbiamo un lavoro.
A Giovanni Capoto. Giovanni, non ho avuto bisogno di coraggio come te. Non mi sono imbarcato su un vascello insicuro, verso l'ignoto. Non ho dovuto combattere contro la forza delle ondate. Non ho sofferto la fame. Non ho guardato la morte in faccia. Ho viaggiato comodamente con il DC-8 dell'Alitalia. Ho volato sulle onde pericolose. Ho chiuso gli occhi, ho sonnecchiato per qualche ora e sono arrivato nella terra dei miei sogni. Non ci è voluto molto, sai? Non c'è voluto niente. Di pane ne ho in abbondanza, di acqua calda pure, ma non ho scoperto l'Eldorado che cercavo. Ho scoperto invece occhiate sprezzanti, una natura ostile, un vuoto incolmabile nell'anima. Ho scoperto cosa vuol dire essere migrante.
Dai, da solo. Oh, brava, brava, papà. Finito, dai, ancora. Vai. Gira, dai, brava, guarda, ma ora vieni a vedere. Oh, guarda, gira un altro po' qua, Attenzione, papà, che adesso qui esce molto. Attenzione, gira un po' così.
There is something about coming from a peasant reality that has to be kept. It's a love affair that when you make wine, you know that, when you put some spices, the touch, and it's like making love.
Yes,
making
of
wine.
course, of
You know
course,
that,
of course, yes.
You can be good about it and be not so good about it, and well, it's a matter of touch.
You learn. You have to
You learn, right?
Yes.
And I find that this is something that I want my children to be able to appreciate.
When I thought of being Italian as a kid, I didn't think of, the Mona Lisa. I didn't think of the thousands of years of culture and history that Italy was. I had no sense of that. I simply had a sense of my parents who were farmers, that we were slightly poor, that we didn't do things quite as luxuriously as other people seemed to. We lived very much as if every penny was our last, and I can remember once when I was 6, I think, that my mother was going shopping downtown, and I asked her if she could buy me a chocolate bar as a gift, and she turned to me and said, "Don't you know we owe $60,000 to the bank?" And that was sort of emblematic of the whole mentality, the whole sort of fear that I thought we lived under in those years, that at any minute it might be all taken away from us and we'd be out on the street.
What was the first 2 words of English you learned, Ma?
You got a job for me.
You got a job for me. That was the first.
Knock on the door with a big lunch. You got a job for me. I was 17 years old.
First 2 words.
I never go out of the house. That's a true story. I always was treated like a queen in my house, but here they are. We gotta working hard. La sera che ci siamo incontrati, lui mi ha parlato proprio onesto. Ha detto, Angela, se io ti piaccio, ti faccio simpatie, a me mi piace tu, ci possiamo sposare. Però non pensare che io sono un milionario e ti posso offrire una vita splendida. Io ho lavorato, ho aiutato la mia mamma e mie sorelle. Quello che posso fare faccio pure per mia moglie e i miei figli. Un domani se ce ne abbiamo. But to be honest, I don't believe it so much. I think he's a liar too. But I said it anyway. I said it. So in a month's time.
What did you think the truth was?
Well, I was thinking maybe he's a little bit having more money and he don't want to show it to find if I love him or not. But I like him in one way. The first thing, I like him.
Like
and then I said,
come on.
And then I said, okay, I come in Canada and I will do whatever we possibly can do.
I think every move.
And then we get married, thank God we get married, we come in Toronto. And we start to work for Angela.
My parents to me are heroes. And, you know, despite the trials and tribulations that I had to go through to establish myself, which as far as I'm concerned, I think is natural. You know, I think every human being has to go through the trial of struggle and self-assertion to make their own persona and their own being, you know, mature and come into its own. That's a natural thing, but my parents dedicated their lives to ensure that I would have opportunities that they never had. And my experience with the community as a whole was that they are some of the most passionate, committed, hardworking people that you could ever possibly, you know, have the privilege to live with. So for me personally, I feel a great deal of love for them. And so the obligation is just purely out of my own personal choice to feel that within what I do, I will always like to carry a little piece of them with me too.
Even more than a tired man, Vito is a sad man. All Sunday afternoon finds him rocking in the Brighton rocker in the backyard of the house he's earned, under the sky he's created of green fiberglass jutting from the roof. There is only one heaven, the heaven of the home. There was only one paradise, the garden that kept them little children even as adults, until one angel, Lucia, his luckless offspring, fell, refusing to share in his light. Well, I think it was very difficult for my parents. They left Italy in the 50s, and they get cut off from the social changes that were happening in Italy, and they interpret what are normal generational conflicts of values get intensified because they interpret it as being, you know, English things, that Canadian things that their children want, and a rejection of themselves.
Daughters from Italian women and other tragedies. My father called me whore, and my mother cried. A young Italian woman's claim to prostitution is any activity past the midnight hour. His eyes were coral as he rammed his fist inside my mouth, reminding me, and my mother screamed. How will they face the neighbors in the morning? If only I could be more like my married sister or the virgin daughters of the virgin neighbors. And how did the devil come to live inside our house? And my mother prays.
I can't afford to only be nostalgic or sentimental about my Italian culture. It is the source of love and laughter and warmth. And at the same time, it told me that I was less because I was a woman. I found my family life restricted. I found very few possibilities in terms of my future and what was expected of me. The women in my family had very traditional expectations of marriage and children, and without any other dimension to their lives.
This was the goal that we had been taught. That was our lot in life, you know. You're new immigrant girls, you learn to become good secretaries, you find a nice young man, you get married, you have children, and your life is set, you know. Then you wait and you die. Oh, sounds awful, doesn't it? Yeah, it does sound awful.
I think that I felt within my family there was a limited sense of what was possible, a limited sense of what it was right to do. Partly because, again, of the background my parents came out of. They wanted to see us all sort of well-established financially with families, to live out the traditional lifestyle. And that was not where I saw myself going.
I knew deep down inside I didn't want to have the kind of life my mother was living, you know? I didn't want to have to be stuck in a job I didn't like. I didn't want to have to be married and do all those things my mother was doing that didn't bring her any pleasure, that didn't bring her any kind of satisfaction. I mean, she did them because she had to do them, you know. I knew there was something better. I knew that I had the potential to maybe do something more, and I just went for it.
When I was a young kid, and I had made that decision, of course, you know, it was like dealt with a lot of ridicule, and I became the brunt of a lot of jokes, you know, like a lot of people would come out to me, hey, what's the matter with you, kid? You know, what do you think you are, Michelangelo or something, you know? Or it would be like, what do you think you are, Picasso? You know, what's the matter with you? You know, those guys were geniuses, you know, this kind of attitude, you know, and then, of course, from people who cared about you, there was a lot of concern, you know, and sadness and crying and lamenting, you know, and it's like he's lost. What's the matter with him? Is he on drugs? You know, all this kind of thing. And, you know, really, it was the only recourse I had was to leave. Because There was no other way. There was just no other way. If I had to do what it was that I wanted to do and believed I should do, I had to actually leave. Because it was incomprehensible for people that, you know, how would you even begin to address the problem of becoming an artist?
To have a son like an artist, you know, I think it's really great. It's beautiful. But the only trouble is my son works so hard, but I still don't understand the work he's doing. For one way I'm happy, for the other way I still, you know, that's true. No lie. But that's the way it goes. And then once my son is happy, I think I'm happy.
And you try to support in every way.
Oh.
In every way, until we are alive.
No problem.
Vince chooses to be an artist because he's in his blood. That's what he wants to do. And everybody says, well, many them, they say, if Vince chooses a different direction, Vince will be millionaire. Will be the best lawyer we have in town. But Vince take this direction, well, maybe when he died, the Gloria come. But I always pray God, the Gloria gotta come before I died, not my son.
Whenever I drive around with my father through the city, we often, you know, come to a certain corner and he'll say, you know, I worked over there, and so we'll drive on the 401 and he'll say, you know, I really worked 6 months over there, then we were laid off, and then we were hired again and whatnot. And go to the airport to pick up somebody, and he'll remind me once again that he worked at Terminal 1 and pouring cement and so on. So he relates to the city, I think, through the bricks that he carried. Whereas I relate to the city through photographic encounters, you know, that I've had. So our conversations can be quite bizarre sometimes, because you'll say, I carry bricks there, and I'll say, well, I waited 2 hours for the sun to for a cloud to move over or whatever. The one thing I love about photography is that it enables me to get close to people. You have to be there when you take the picture. You can't create a picture, you know, from another room or from another city. And when you look at someone in the eyes and they look back at you in your own eyes, I mean, I think it's pretty hard to hide. And I think that's what happened with my grandmother. The more I got to photograph her, the more I got to know her and like her. We had this very special, almost conspiratorial relationship. I hope I've captured a feeling of, I think a feeling of alienation, that she came to this country at a very old age, and already in her 70s. And not only did she come from a different country, she came from a rural, totally rural environment to a large city. Actually, she was terrified of city life in terms of traffic and all these things, noise and so on. Coming from a very, very small village. And when she died, I remember I was very hurt when she died. I was asked to photograph her funeral. Not so much her funeral, but to photograph her in dead, which is very traditional in southern Italy and in the Mediterranean in general. So I did take those pictures and never printed them for years and years and years. And eventually I did print them, and that's part of the essay. She's alive and dead at the same time.
This view from the hills opens the landscape like surgery. In my fingers, the grapes are rubbed to glowing, the light in their skins as from dark rooms, or the candle's flame ripening with midnight. Such is memory. It darkens what it seems to illuminate in time. Whatever is preserved must also alter, like love loving us not for what we are, for what we hide. I think it's a spiritual presence in my life. I think it's the grandmother My father's mother, her name was Maria as well, and I never saw her again after we left Italy. She died when I was 8 years old. And she seems to be an angelic presence in my poems, and it's my mother, my grandmother there in the garden in the Villa delle Rose who keeps drawing me back.
Il governatore fa schifo, che l'avessero ammazzata a tutti. Loro cosa fanno? Dicono per dire, chi sta azienda di qua hanno per dire 100 pecore e ne devono eliminare 50. A copigliano pigliano. Le povere gente, sti operai, così, li mantengono schiavi. Tutto ciò che raccoglie se lo mangia tutto il governo, Saidi, la mafia, chi ti caratterizzano. In Italia non c'è niente, piccolo operaio, una patata lo culo e battente.
Sicily has certain ideas for me that activate certain aspects of myself, like the struggle of my family, the pain, death. And Sicily itself, I mean, it's a landscape of many wounds, you know, of many scars, you know. It's all over the place. It's been ravaged for centuries, you know. You can feel that, you can see that. And then when you put that in context of your own family experiences, it affects me very deeply to consider that struggle. I think it's a very, very important thing to be in touch with in terms of knowing what it is you want to say or you want to construct or create.
If I had been born in Italy, I think it would have been difficult to come out from underneath the pressure of the august tradition that they have there. I know I sense that very much in Florence in terms of the art. There didn't seem to be much in the way of new artists coming out of Florence, and I can see why, because you look around the city and there are, you know, 1,000 years of art history that you have to compete with, and I came back to Canada, I think, appreciating the newness of the country and the possibility for really embarking on a you know, an exploration of discovery in this country when you're involved in the arts.
Oddly enough, I didn't really understand that I was Italian until I began to write. And it was as a result of the response to my writing, which was fairly consistent, was that, my God, it's so Italian, which came as a surprise and a somewhat pleasant one, because it wasn't until then that I realized what the response was based upon was the directness of cutting through the nonsense to get to what it is you want to say.
Ma, I don't understand. Every time I talk for you, I talk shit. And every time I see that fucking job, I don't want to do it. I got no ambition.
How much?
400, maybe more. That's it. All fucking day they got me. For the whole fucking day, it's disgusting. Because of you. You should have fucking been there. No, you have to go be lifting things. What the fuck were you doing on the roof?
I came here one night, exactly right here, and I heard two guys talking about ducks and undercutting and the business, so on and so forth, and about a girlfriend being married off. And I took the rhythm of their language and made a story to substantiate. And it's play on words because of the emotion that was going down. They very rarely listened to what the other was saying, except a few questions afterwards. Then they would respond, so that was a beautiful ballet for me.
Well, I talked to that Jersey guy, right?
What Jersey?
Jersey, fucking Jersey, the king.
Ah, for fuck the king, the duck king.
Yeah, the duck king, 4-inch duck. 4-inch duck was easy. Those Polish guys, man, they got the jobs, man. They telling you something, anything. I vibrate that position, like 4,000 square feet. You know, 4,000 square feet house in Jersey comes up to me, wants a favor, right? You know, so he talks to me with a fucking accent. Wants me to give him Teresa. Wants me to give up my fucking flower.
What do you mean you're afraid to reorder? It's 12 feet tall. Don't be afraid, tall. Have a muscle.
Well, I think from the very, very basic is the celebration of the human spirit. And I'm not saying that other nationalities don't celebrate that, but Italians do it with such violence. And in violence, I mean with a passion that verges on losing one's own flesh. Because it is so forceful, and that I'm so happy about. It's like a tidal wave, and it's a tidal wave that comes about 50 times a day. There's never a lot of calm, but when there is, it's waiting for the next tidal wave.
I do feel the tremendous passion about the same types of things in general that they feel, like family, like heritage and connectedness, and a tremendous love and feeling for home and place, you know. But at the same time, there's a time and place for all of that, and sometimes you got to know when to hold back, you know, when to restrain yourself a little bit, you know.
I love explosions. I love getting it out there where nobody can hear what the hell the other person is saying. It's wonderful. It's a free-for-all. That is life. That is life. It's a dance. It's dance. It's music. Everybody shouting at each other. It's music to my ears.
Buoni cavalieri. Perché daccela la neve troppo, troppo freddo. Casa sta bene, vedi? Ne spogliamo nudi e camminiamo.
One thing I realized being from Quebec is that I hate Canada. I got assimilated by the anti-Canadian thing. But I hate also Quebec. So I have no identity here. I will never feel as if I will become anything. I feel it's the end. My existence as a human being ends. There is only one way out. It is by espousing the Québécois historical process.
J'étais un militant politique en faveur de l'indépendance du Québec. J'ai milité aussi en faveur de l'affirmation du français au Québec, etc. Comment j'ai milité? Bon, j'ai écrit des articles dans les journaux pour expliquer aux francophones ce qui se passait dans les communautés immigrantes, mais j'ai écrit aussi dans les journaux en langue italienne pour expliquer aux Italiens ce qu'étaient les aspirations légitimes, selon moi, du peuple québécois francophone.
I tried to write in French myself. I said, well, I'll write in French. I was born here. I want to be part of this group, the Francophone group, and it didn't work. I mean, sure, they patted me on the shoulders, but when it basically came down to real acceptance, I mean, cultural acceptance, being part of anthologies, being part of the mainstream, it was impossible.
Quand on a eu Julien, on avait pensé à l'élever de façon bilingue. Au début, on ne savait pas comment ça allait tourner, ça, mais finalement, c'est arrivé de façon assez naturelle. Que toi, tu parlais italien avec eux, avec Julien d'abord et avec les autres après. Et moi, je parlais français. Bon. Julien et Gabriel, qui ont toujours parlé italien avec toi, ont quand même eu une exposition très, très réduite à l'italien jusqu'au moment où on est allé en Italie. Donc, pour Julien et Gabriel, ça a été, le fait d'aller en Italie, ça a été une occasion d'enrichir leur langue considérablement.
À ton école, à toi, est-ce que les profs, disons, tendent à souligner l'aspect québécois des choses ou non?
No, abbiamo fatto un orale sul francese. Dovevamo parlare che pensavamo del francese nel Quebec e come facevamo per proteggerlo. E il professore aveva l'aria di essere un péquiste.
Péquiste, sì.
Mais il n'en parle pas souvent, ils ne veulent pas en parler.
Mais est-ce qu'ils essaient de vous influencer par...
Non, ils n'ont pas le droit de toute façon.
Quand je vais en Italie, c'est un peu comme la situation ici, sauf à l'envers. C'est-à-dire que ici à Montréal, mes amis me considèrent tous comme plus italiens que canadiens, mais alors que quand je vais en Italie, mes amis me considèrent tous plus canadien que italien. Alors c'est un peu comme étrange, mais ça me dérange pas vraiment, comme je suis habitué.
Nous ne voulons pas seulement intégrer les immigrants à notre culture majoritaire francophone, mais nous voulons aussi échanger, créer une situation d'échange entre la culture majoritaire et les cultures minoritaires. L'interculturalisme au Québec a été une réponse au multiculturalisme qui nous est venu, bien entendu, du Canada anglais. Et on a toujours vu le multiculturalisme comme une stratégie ou encore une idéologie qui voulait mettre, par exemple, la culture québécoise ou encore le peuple québécois au même niveau que n'importe quel autre groupe ethnique, aussi petit soit-il. Partout au Canada. Et donc, bien entendu, là, pour les francophones du Québec surtout, mais aussi pour les francophones du reste du Canada, qui se perçoivent encore comme l'un des deux peuples fondateurs, ce n'était pas acceptable de se faire considérer comme n'importe quel autre groupe ethnique.
I am a WAP, I'm Italian. What do I do now? I am belonging in this culture. I am part of something that is moving, that will not die. What it will become, I do not know. I want to participate in that. because that gives me a lot of energy and a lot of self-love, which I was losing here. I was becoming more and more confused here, really, really confused. Writing in French, in English. Sure, I'm a trilingual writer, big deal. I speak badly all those languages. I write badly in all those languages. I mean, I have to check the dictionary. All this politics is a waste of time. It ruined me, you know. It basically made me very depressed, bitter, extremely bitter, in fact. I want a divorce, you know. I want to leave, you know. I've made a decision, and I'm slowly moving all these books one by one to Toronto.
Sometimes during those first weeks, I would wake suddenly in the middle of the night and for a moment in the darkness feel a disorientation so complete that I might never have known what a world was, or a bed, or a chair. My mind in that instant seemed to mirror exactly the darkness of the room around me, seemed to contain no thoughts, no past, only a sudden panic and terror. And it was only when I could put together a little story in my head, a boat, a train, until I arrived finally at the bed I was lying in, that the room around me slipped into dim focus and the panic passed. I thought then that the blackness I fell into in those nights must be like death, that I had dreamed of being dead, because sometimes afterwards I could remember an image of myself closing my eyes and sinking into a sleep as dark as the sea. Though it was never the moment I closed my eyes that frightened me, but the moment I opened them, when I emerged again into everything strange and new and forgotten, as into the sudden horror of being born or born again.
Right now there's a lot of, it seems that in the press, at least, there's a lot of bad feelings towards immigrants. So it may be a difficult time for some immigrants. But it's still nevertheless a very important part of Canadian life, and you feel very much part of that. My immigrant experience has enabled me to penetrate certain worlds on certain levels, which in a way that perhaps I wouldn't have been able to had I not been an immigrant. I think in today's world that can be an advantage, not a disadvantage, because you can enter many more cultures. And you can also have a deeper appreciation of another point of view. When one thinks of all the great numbers of people who live here from different countries who are immigrants for generations and generations and generations, and then one looks at the experience one gets in, let's say, literature, or theater, or photography, one would think there would be a lot more that relates to immigrants. And I think on a personal level, with my pictures, I would hope to contribute to that, to try and change that somewhat.
I think it has now become almost trendy to look for what is different, to privilege or overvalue sometimes something simply because it does not come out of what is considered the mainstream or the canon or what is written or produced by the usual suspects. These differences are now being valorized, but are they being sort of valorized in their fullness or simply in the continuing sort of stereotypes of the past? So, you know, it's fine to appreciate Italian cuisine, but that is not Italo-Canadian culture. I think is dangerous to begin to see these cultures as sort of self-contained ethnicities or self-contained mini cultures with their sort of colorful folkloric aspects, as opposed to vast, amorphous, evolving, complex, ambiguous things without clear boundaries, without clear definitions, and wherein you find the whole spectrum of humanity represented in some way.
The dream to build a cathedral really came about as a wish to commemorate the end of our millennium and the beginning of the next. However, as I've been working on it for the past 7 years, I've come to realize that it's really a commemorative monument to my father and the family situation I grew up in. You know, very simple life, not complicated. You went and you worked the land, you look after the animals, and very down-to-earth, simple, natural cycle, day after day. There was a certain peace and a certain kind of happiness that went along with it because things were not complicated. You were not in a rush to do things. You did what was necessary to survive, and that made you feel good. Well, I envision the cathedral to be facing that way. If you were on top of the hill, the front door will be facing this way. For the reason of the terrain, there is already a kind of a road here which could go around the trees, and you wouldn't have to disturb anything. And you would be approaching the front door, coming in that way. I would want for people, when they walk into that place, into this monument, cathedral, they would feel like they have arrived home. There is no color, there is no religion, there is just home, belonging.
Saudi